Here we are for part 2 of our deep space video that we're following along with what Marty was able to show us. So we were able to make the stars from using noise and playing around with levels and stuff like that. That was a good trick in part 1 of the video. Now we're going to make the actual galaxy on top of it. So what I'm going to need you to do is we're going to make a brand new layer. So in the toolbox, in the layers window, all the way over in the corner, there's the fold over piece of paper icon right at the bottom of the layers window. And when you click on that, you will get a new layer. Now I clicked, there we go. And we're going to give it some pixel information. If we're going to go to filter, render, clouds. And all that does is take your foreground and background colors and kind of mixes them all up all over your screen in like this cloud formation. It's useful because when you use the filter that we're going to use next, if this was just a solid color, this wouldn't work, right? We're going to go to filter, distort, twirl. And we're going to take the angle and we're going to push it all the way out to 999. Now imagine if this was solid color, you wouldn't be able to get these bandings in here because you need some variation for something like this to work. So that was under filter, distort, twirl, make it 999, and then click OK. So now we have a beautiful twirl going on here. All right, so we're also going to blur this a little bit. So I'll go back to filter again. And we're going to go to blur, and we're going to go to Gaussian blur. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm going to use 20 pixels. So I'm just going to type it in, 20, OK. All right, now I want to get rid of all this stuff around the outside here because I really only want the twirly stuff. So in my toolbox, I'm going to go to where my selection tools are, and it's the second tool in toolbox, right under move tool. It's usually on rectangle select, and I want ellipse select. So you click and hold on this tool, and then this little flyout will appear, and you have to go down to ellipse select, and when I let go, I actually have to click on it again for it to change the tool. Otherwise, it'll just go back to rectangular, and that could be a little bit frustrating. So I want to select basically the area that is twirled. So I'm going to go to the middle of my screen with this tool, and I'm going to hold the Alt or Option key right dead center of my galaxy, and I'm going to start clicking and dragging out. Now you can barely see it on my screen, but you should be able to see it on yours. The ellipse you'll be dragging from the center, and when I hold Shift, it'll lock it in and make it perfectly round. So now when I let go, you'll see about how far I went. I'm going to go about where the twirl started to kind of fade off. So now when I let go, you can see that's about how far I went out. We're going to have to blur this a little bit by use of the selection. So we're going to go to, we're not going to use a blur tool for this. We're actually going to feather the edges. So I'm going to go to select at the top of the screen, the select drop-down menu, modify, feather. And it's going to be a pretty big number. I'm going to type in 80. 80 pixels. And I'm going to click OK. And now we're going to turn this into a mask by hitting the layer mask icon. So in the layers window, we're going to mask this. Now you could potentially copy and paste this to its own layer and you would see that this has a fuzzy edge, but I really don't want to confuse you and I want to kind of stick a little bit with what Marty does here. So he clicked the mask icon, and what that automatically does is creates a mask that will block off the stuff that was not selected. And you can see now how this like fades off into space pretty nicely. So I like that. All right, so now I want to duplicate the background layer. So I'm going to click all the way on my stars layer. And remember, duplicating a layer is Command J. We should know that by now. Or Control J. And now I have a second copy of that because we're going to actually need some of this later on. We might actually have to copy the stars again at one point, but we'll see how that goes. So I duplicated the background, and I'm going to drag this to the front. So remember, you can arrange your layers by clicking and dragging things. So let me show you what I just did. This layer was here after we duplicated it, but I want it on top of this layer. So I can either take this layer and drag it down, or I can take this layer and just drag it up. You see it kind of like nudges down, and once it does, you know you can slide that right in there. And then you could change the blend mode. This is the crucial step here. Change the blend mode. I believe it's linear dodge. Yes, and now I can see stars through my galaxy. That looks pretty good. Okay, we're gonna make another new layer. So, in the bottom of your layers window, click the little fold over piece of paper icon right down there. Whoop, whoop. And now we're going to do clouds again. So we're gonna go to filter, render, clouds, and that'll put clouds all over our screen. And we're going to take this layer and we're going to change it from normal, the blend mode from normal, to multiply. So that's right at the top of the layers window. And that kind of makes our thing look like just like a ball of dust floating in space. We want to see some of the twirls, so I have to bring the opacity down. Somewhere between 50 and 60 is fine. So I put mine at 57. And that should work. So it's multiply, and then somewhere between 50 and 60. I think Marty put his exactly 60. Okay. Now we're going to make a new layer, and we're going to put a little color on this. We're going to use a gradient to do that. So you guys can have some choices here once we get into the gradient tool. But the gradient tool is the tool that actually looks like a gradient in the toolbox. It's in the same toolbox as Paint Bucket, so if for some reason Paint Bucket was out, you have to click and hold and then select the gradient tool. And then at the top of your screen, you'll see a picture of the gradient. Usually it comes up with just the foreground and background ones. You can change it to one of the default ones. So usually it looks like this when you first start it. I was messing around with this before, so I had this gradient selected. And you know what? I'm going to go with that gradient. I'm going to check reverse though, so that the end of the gradient is going to end up in the beginning of the gradient. So I clicked reverse over here for that to happen. And if you want to edit your colors, you want to change this to whatever colors you want. If you click directly on the picture of the gradient, you could go in and you can move these sliders around. You can click on the little slider and pick whatever colors you want. It's up to you. Remember, you have to click OK out of all those windows. All right, so I have my gradient picked. I have my gradient tool. And now I'm going to make sure that this is a radial gradient. So up at the top here, we're going to change this from linear to radial, which means it's going to be circular. Remember, I put it on reverse so that the yellow is going to end up in the middle. I want that in my brighter area. So now I'm going to just click and drag to about the edge of my little twirly thing. And this kind of covered up everything, which you would expect it to do because this is on normal. So we're going to change this to color, and now we'll be able to see right through it. Color's all the way at the bottom. Takes a little while to scroll there, but whoa, that looks awesome.